The world for today's kids is much more frightening than the world was to me when I was a kid. Emerging from World War II, I went through a period of my adolescence when the world seemed a very safe place. I mean, Eisenhower was president. And we didn't think about or worry about what the future would be. But I have grandchildren now who are bombarded with the concerns that we all have about the world. We didn't have television when I was growing up. So none of that was accessible to me, what was out there. And now it is, and kids are aware of it all the time and concerned about it all the time, and knowing they'll be part of whatever's coming and that it might be something to be scared of. So I think it's a reason that they turn to these books that postulate a future. And the particular books that you mentioned, including The Giver, all create a character who is a young person who sets out to affect the future, to change the future, to improve the future. And I think that's a journey that kids enjoy participating in. I had written a number of books before The Giver. I don't know, I'd have to go back and count how many, but perhaps as many as 20. And it was time to start a new book, and I didn't yet know what the new book would be. I always wait for some inspiration to strike me. And as it happened at that time, my father, who was very old and in a nursing home, was beginning to lose pieces of his memory. He didn't have Alzheimer's, but he was 90 or maybe 88, I don't remember exactly, but pieces of his memory were beginning to disappear. And so I was thinking about that. And I was aware that he was forgetting some things that had clearly been very painful for him during his life. The death of his first child, my older sister. He didn't remember her suddenly. He remembered very little, I became aware, of World War II. He'd spent that time in the Pacific, on an island in the Pacific. That was all gone. And so I began to think, hey, maybe that's a good thing if we could just obliterate the things that had ever been a source of pain to us. But then I began to think the way a writer does, but what if we did that? What else would we lose? And the beginning of the book that turned out to be The Giver began to appear. I had never been a writer of or a reader of science fiction or fantasy, but all of a sudden I was dealing with questions that could only fall into that realm. That was a little disconcerting to me, but you may notice, having read it, that I avoided any mention of technology or how they accomplished what they had accomplished. When you write a book and it goes out there in 10,000 copies or 40,000 copies, every person who picks it up is reading a different book from the one you wrote, because everybody brings their own imagination to it, their own memories, their own emotions. And so what they're seeing when they read is not what you saw when you wrote. And yet a movie goes out there to, they tell me, 5 million people the first weekend, and they're all seeing exactly the same thing. That's interesting to me. It's not frightening, but it's very different from the book. I did not expect to be as involved with the movie as I've been. My contract does not give me any control over the movie, but they were very generous in asking my opinion. And then they began asking it more and more. And then next thing I knew, even though I'd said, no, I'm not going out to Los Angeles, next thing I knew I was on a plane to Los Angeles to meet with them, and then I'm on a plane to Cape Town to watch them filming. And they continued to seek my advice. They did not always take my advice, and why should they? I'm not a filmmaker. But I was very gratified that they sought my advice and continue to, because the movie is not, as they say, wrapped up yet. There are still little bits and pieces that are undergoing some transition. So I've been quite involved with it, and I've been very grateful to them for allowing me that involvement. But ultimately, it's their project and they're movie makers, and I'm not. And I haven't seen the finished product yet, but it will not be the same as the book, nor should it be. It's a different genre.